Welcome to One of a Kind podcast. Slay that stage, your backstage pass to the minds of world champions of public speaking.
Discover the stories, the strategies, and the skills of world-class speakers and get ready to transcend your fear of public speaking and slay every stage life presents to you.
Hello, and welcome back to your very own podcast, Slay That Stage, Champions Tour. As promised, we have yet another world champion with your hosts Ayesha Hussain and Tanvi Bhatt. Tanvi, would you like to bring in the guest?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Slay That Stage. I was just thinking, that episode after episode, the whole journey of hosting this amazing podcast that we bring these extraordinary speakers from all walks of life, from across the world, from all nationalities to you, to learn how they have mastered the art of speaking, how they've mastered the craft of storytelling, and more importantly, how they have transcended their personal fears of gracing a stage and then eventually learning to slay the stage. And today we are going to have one such path breaker, if I may call him, Dr. Vikas Jhingran. He's been the world champion of public speaking with the Toastmasters in 2007. And his journey in the world of speaking and after winning the championship is truly one of a kind because he didn't take the route of being a public speaking coach or a keynote speaker or starting his own business of coaching and empowering more aspiring speakers to learn and master the craft. He continued a very different path of his career, which he will tell us more about as we bring him online. But what I would love to tell you is Dr. Vikas Jhingran is possibly the only Indian, I guess, in my opinion, so far, who's won the World Championship of Public Speaking. So I'm very excited to speak to him today and understand how his roots, how his journey has enabled him to transcend his own fear of speaking and conquering stages across the world. And after his journey of winning the championship, how life has transformed for him. So, before we bring him on board, I would also like to talk about the book that he's written. I think that's an amazing title of his book. His book is called Emote. It's using emotions to make your message memorable, something that all of us can definitely take a few leaps out of to learn how to bring in emotional variety, emotional mastery in our tone, our pace, our pitch, our volume, and our voice craft mastery while speaking, whether it's in front of 10 people or 10,000 people. So lots to learn from Vikas today. Aisha, could we have Dr. Vikas Jhingran join us on the stage?
So he's already joined. Welcome,
Great.
Vikas.
Hi,
Hello.
I
everybody.
sorry, go ahead. I actually just got very curious on the questions that you talked about that he didn't pursue. But and before we move on, I actually heard your speech. Who are you? So my question is, and to our listeners, after all these years, because at different stages you found yourself to be a different person. At this stage, who are you? I'd like to ask that question before we move on.
That's a really interesting question, and it's a very important one because during various stages of our lives, we are different people having different priorities, right? So right now, who I am, the most important who I am right now is that I'm a father of two boys who are right now in high school and middle school, and they take up a lot of my time and a lot of my joy comes from just spending time with them. But apart from that, I'm also a member of a larger community. I'm a part of a larger ecosystem that is not only just trying to help others become better communicators, but on a more technical sense, we are also trying to figure out how to manage the kind of the energy situation in the company that I work with for the future. So there are many aspects of who we are. At any point, one aspect usually takes prominence. And as we move along and our life continues on its journey, other things become more prominent. So right now, the most prominent thing that I'm a dad, and I'm proud to be one.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Vikas. I'm very curious, as I did hint, what has been the career 1.2 like for you before the whole World Championship of Public Speaking happened? And could you help us understand what inspired or pushed you to participate in a contest like this?
Mm. Yeah, so actually, my journey, of course, began in India. I grew up in India in the city of Calcutta, and had like most people who kind of are brought up there and then come to the US, mostly focused on the technical side. So anytime we got, I was studying just to make sure that I got into good colleges. Went to a very good technical college in India, and then had the opportunity to come to the US for graduate school. But when I came to the US and I started working in corporate America, I began to realize that communication is going to be a really important aspect of my success in corporate America. And what struck me even more was that nobody had told me how important communication would be in my journey after school. And in fact, the school system is also not set up to teach you the main aspects of communication. In fact, the schooling system emphasizes reading and writing, and what is most applicable when you start working is speaking and listening. So you come out of the school system after spending many, many years uh, in the with the idea that you've been prepared for corporate life, and then you walk out into the corporate world and you feel that you're actually ill prepared to succeed. And that is exactly what I found my situation to be. In fact, there were situations happening in my company where I was doing all the work, but a marketing person was presenting my work. And that was for very good reason, is because the marketing person was very good at communication, and that was their skill.
Right.
But I was the person who knew all the information, and all the analysis was done by me. And that really didn't sit well with me. I said, okay, why can't I've done all the work, why can't I be the person who also presents? And my manager was very upfront at that time. He said, no problem, but you'll have to get better at communicating, and you'll have to get better at presentations. And so that's what sparked my whole journey in Toastmasters, but just generally as learning more about communication. I initially started with various other courses. There's a program called the Dale Carnegie Foundation, which is a leadership program but has some communication elements to it. I enrolled in that, and then slowly I began to find out, okay, where can I practice my communication skills? Where can I learn? And that's when I came across the Toastmasters forum.
Yeah.
And since then, I've just been a part of the platform and the forum that Toastmasters provide, because I feel it is one of the best and the cheapest ways in which you can continue to grow as a speaker. So that's where I started. Then I started entering into competitions, because I realized that competitions actually are one of the best ways within the Toastmasters system to help you grow as a speaker, because that environment allows you to produce what I call the gold standard, which is that it's very unusual for, even within Toastmasters, for somebody to practice the same speech again and again until you get it to a place where it is as good as it can be.
Correct.
And if you don't have that this is how good I can be, then you have no metric to judge your normal speech by. So once you've done that, once you've participated and really gone on to maybe at a district level or higher, you've got a speech that is the gold standard. This is how good I can be. And after that, you will never write a speech that is not close to that standard, because now you have something that you can compare yourself with, and you know you can be this good.
Yeah.
So that opportunity is lost by many people who do not compete. And it's because they always, they give a speech and then they move on to the next one, and they move on to the next one. They're growing as a speaker, but they're not able to figure out what is their gold standard, and so therefore they don't push themselves or hold the mirror to themselves to make sure that they are doing the best that they can, because they don't know what their potential is. That's a very important part of participating in speech contests, is to figure out your gold standard.
Wow.
On that note, I'd actually have to ask you, having been a contestant myself, I played second at district this year. Um, how many versions of your final speech? Because you write it, you deliver it, and you get feedback. You come back to your table, writing table, and that's starting all over again. So I'd like to know how many versions you had for your final speech, or even your semifinals, because that's the one that goes from all the way club to semifinals. Um, and if any coaching helped you, and how important was that coaching?
Yeah. So it might be useful for me to help you understand my approach to speaking. This is actually quite different from traditional kind of methods you might have heard around speaking. The way I look at any kind of communication, and public speaking being one form of communication, is that there are two aspects to any form of communication. One is what I call the information journey. And then the second aspect is what I call the emotional journey. And what most people focus on is the informational journey. That's what we always try to discuss: what data, what slides, what gestures, what pictures I need to put in front of people. We're talking about always about the information journey. What we almost never think about is the emotional journey that we're taking our audience on. And both of those aspects are important for us to be able to deliver a good speech.
True.
So I have a way in which I think about these speeches, both on the information side and on the emotional side. And when I've met my intent on the emotional side and on the information side, my speech is done. And if I can do that in just a couple of tries, then that's okay. And if I have to do it 100 times or 200 times, then I take the time to prepare it 100, 200 times. It's the what I see sometimes people struggle with is a clear understanding of the outcome. They are not able to figure out when their speech is done. And if you're not able to figure out when your speech is done, then you always keep tinkering, and the tinkering is not always taking the speech forward, right? It's sometimes just you've got it perfect, now you just need to back off, right? This is it. And if you don't have an understanding of what you're trying to do with that speech, then you never know when the speech is done, right? And I think that's so. I would challenge you when you ask that question, is that actually some speeches take very little effort because I'm able to get to where I want my audience to be in just a few iterations, and some take many, many, many iterations, hundreds of iterations, because for whatever reason I'm not able to get the audience where I need them to be from the speech. So you have to understand the journey, you have to understand the end point. And when you're clear about that, that actually is the starting point of a speech. Once you understand where you want your audience to be at the end of the speech, then you start writing your speech to get them there. And you also have a very clear idea of when the speech is done, because you know where your audience needs to be through a practice session, and you'll know whether you've got them there.
Amazing. So, because I'm just wondering, what kind of questions would you ask yourself or someone who you're possibly, coaching or helping with their speech craft? What is the right question to ask to figure out that, this is as best as the speech could possibly get, and I need to close it now? So, you said you need to ask those questions. What possibly would be those questions? Can you give us a few examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So the process of writing a speech actually becomes, starts at the end. And what I mean by that is, you have an outcome in mind from delivering that speech. And an outcome could be an action or something that you want your audience to do,
Right.
right? As a result of listening to your
Correct.
speech. So that action then translates to, the action is not actually in your control. You cannot force anybody to do the things that you want them to do. But what is in your control through the speech is how they need to feel so that they actually do what you want them to do. So, so the question that you need to really ask is, how should my audience be feeling at the end of a speech? And then you write and deliver a speech to make them feel that way, because if they actually feel that way, there is a good chance they will do what you are asking them to do. So the doing part is not in your hands, but the feeling part is. That's the process of delivering a good speech. And that's where the emotional journey comes into play. Is the emotional journey is really taking the audience from wherever they are at emotionally at the start of a speech to where you want them to be at the end of the speech. And that where you want them to be at the end of the speech is related to the action or the act you want them to do after the speech is done. So you start at the end with understanding the action, converting that into a feeling or an emotion, and then you write your speech to get that emotional journey from the start to the end. And that then allows you also to figure out the kinds of questions you need to ask during practice. Most people ask very technical questions when they get feedback from their audience. The single biggest question or most important question you need to ask your audience is, how are you feeling at the end of the speech? And if that feeling is aligned with what you had in mind in terms of where you want them to be, you've achieved the purpose of the speech. So that is how you find out whether you're done or not. If your audience comes back and keeps telling you, hey, this is how I feel, these are my emotions at the end of the speech, and they align with the emotions you had in mind, that this is where I want my audience to be, you're done. And and that these are things that allow you also to help figure out feedback. When you get feedback, sometimes feedback is very confusing. You go to one audience, they love a particular story, another audience hates that particular story. Some people say, use this gesture, others say, though, that gesture is distracting. It is actually very, very confusing when you go and present over to multiple audiences as to exactly what's working and what's not working. But all of those things are actually what I call the mechanics of speaking and are not important. The most important thing is, how are they feeling at the end of the speech? And if both those sets of audiences tell you that they feel the same way and the feeling is aligned with how you want them to feel, then everything that they have actually told you that you need to change should be discarded, because you actually achieved your purpose.
True.
So this is a very different way of looking at speaking, right? It goes to the heart of what communication is about, and then being able to come up with this very systematic way of understanding how to develop a speech based on information and emotion, and allow you to get to a place and understanding that allows you to develop that speech that really hits the audience and gets them to the emotional level that you want them to be at.
Amazing. Wow. I think this is one of the most profound insights I've had in all our conversations with so many amazing champions. You beautifully and very eloquently simplified the whole journey. A lot of us, we begin with an objective that, yes, ultimately this is what I want them to do, but nobody really takes that step back and translates that into the emotional end game also, right? They keep it at a very action oriented, and the actions don't want to happen unless that emotional switch has happened, which you rightly said. And that's been like a beautiful realization for me as well today. Asha, what are your thoughts on this?
I again, this is not something I had thought about. As you said, Tanvi, it was most whenever I've delivered speech, and like, okay, you have to have the perfect gestures, the perfect tone, the perfect body language, and the whole theatricals, and have the perfect grammar. But I mean, in my 2 years of speaking, I've never thought of what emotions am I invoking in the audience. I've always thought, oh, I want them to take this action. But as Vikas rightly said, that if you've not invoked the right emotions, at that point they might think, yeah, okay, we'll do it, but it's not really going to happen. And that's a very different and new perspective I've learned today. So,
Yeah, and
wow.
actually, I'll bring even more tension in the room. in the sense that all of these gestures and the things typically that we learn within Toastmasters, what I call the mechanics of speaking, are only there to drive the emotional journey. So I'll give you an example. For example, you've heard that eye contact is very important in public speaking, right? But nobody tells you why eye contact is very important. The main
Yeah.
reason why eye contact is so important is that the eyes are one of the best ways to convey emotion. And
Right.
there's a saying that the eyes are a window into your soul, right? So if you see emotion in somebody's eyes, you feel it straight away, right? So you'll see that all the tools and the gestures and the voice intonation and everything that you learn within Toastmasters is truly tools that drive the emotional journey. Now, nobody says it that way, but that's how these things become prominent. When they say that somebody's using fantastic intonation, is because they are able to convey really good emotional content in in addition to their information through their voice. And that is why that becomes a very good skill for them. So eventually what you're driving is that emotional journey, and everything that you're doing is either taking away from that emotional journey or adding to that emotional journey. And so if most of us focus on the mechanics, but actually the mechanics are not important. In fact, if for whatever reason you're uncomfortable making eye contact, you just need to understand that there are other tools within the Toastmasters toolkit that allow you to work with emotions. So if you can't work with your eyes at the emotional level, work with your voice, work with your hands, work with other things that also allow you to drive that emotional journey. The only thing you're losing is that by not making eye contact, you losing one of the tools that allow you to drive the emotional journey. But that doesn't mean that you can't just replace it by other
Right.
tools which do the same. Right? It gives you tremendous flexibility and freedom because you're not trying to copy somebody who has a particular skill and is expert or adept at using that particular skill to drive that emotional journey. You may not be able to use that particular skill as effectively as that other person, but you might have a skill that you can use better than anybody else to drive that emotional journey. So it is a very introspective and personal journey that you're planning when you deliver a speech by using what the tools that you have that allow you to connect with people at an emotional level, and then you bring those tools to the table to drive that emotional journey. It frees you up from this mentality that just because somebody else is doing something that is very effective for them, I have to copy, or I have to do that. That is absolutely not true. If you understand the fundamentals of speaking and communication in general, then it completely frees you up. Uh, there are there is nothing that is wrong, or there is nothing that is right. It is, are you able to get them on that emotional journey or not? And if you are able to do that by doing everything wrong, then that is still a fantastic speech. So it's a different way of looking at speaking. It's very outcome focused and not very activity focused or skill focused.
That
So,
actually reminds me of a speech that Darren LaCroix had done. He started with falling on the stage and he stayed there quite long. And I think he was trying to invoke emotion that you're saying, and I'm able to connect it now. That, and then people after him tried having a chair and going upside down, but it wasn't working because they were not trying to focus. The Darren was actually trying to create an emotion, but they were trying to just imitate that, some sort of drama on the stage, but that didn't get them the result that Darren got. So, I mean, it makes sense now that you're trying to create an emotion. And Tanvi, sorry, you were saying something, but that I needed to.
no, I'm glad you brought it up. But I think it's a very important point for everyone to understand that emotional impact is going to be a byproduct of how you really feel about the topic and what you're talking. So the content and context both. And I'll give you my own journey and example, because I have a question to follow up with. For the first 10 years of my career as a speaker, I was a very information focused speaker because I really wanted for the world to know how good I am at what I do. how much I know about what I do, what depth I know it at. It was always about information, information, information. How much can I give in the limited amount of time I have just so that I can impress them all, right? But it was when I met Craig, when I started coaching with him, and I learned the art and craft and the power of telling stories because I had never told even a single story in 10 years of my speaking journey. It was very transactional. I realized that, oh my God, there is a much more beautiful way of speaking than just, trying hard to impress your audience with the information and the knowledge that you have. And that's when the whole shift started happening in me also, as a person, not just as a speaker, as a person. And I started embracing the power of strategic vulnerability to bring forth stories from my own life that I never had the courage to share, right? So, my question is, for example, if someone is not a natural storyteller, they've not learned the art and craft of telling stories from a coach or anyone else, how can they bring in the power of emotions along with information to still be able to connect with their audience?
Mhm. So, working with emotions actually is very natural for us. In fact, it's part of being human.
Right.
Most of what we learn is actually not adding to that skill set, but peeling off the layers so that we can be ourselves, showing our emotions in front of others. There are a lot of societal pressures and just the way that we've been brought up where yeah, people get uncomfortable showing emotion in front of large audiences. So it's a little bit of, like you say, being a little vulnerable and being comfortable with that. But there's a beautiful aspect of communication in front of large audiences when it comes to emotion. The beauty of this is that, like I said, emotions, it's a human thing. And in front of a large audience, if you are connected to the audience, in general, you can be assured that the way you are feeling is exactly how most of the audience is also feeling. So there are there are ideas around emotional intelligence that you can bring into speaking. So this is very, very powerful for speakers. So what you have to do is to go on an emotional journey yourself. And you can be assured that if you are connected with your audience, and we'll talk a little bit about how that connection is established, if you are connected to your audience is going on that emotional journey with you. So you don't have to really worry about how they're feeling. You can be assured that they're feeling exactly how you're feeling
Yeah.
if you're connected with your audience. This is a beauty of kind of only in a large group setting in terms of how thinking about emotions works in speeches. It, it allows you to be extremely confident that if you deliver the speech that you've planned to deliver, you will make your audience feel the way you plan them to feel because you're feeling the same way at the end of it. Which goes to Tanvi's question at the when she started with it, is that stories are one tool that allow you to convey emotion very effectively. They are not the only tool. They are a very effective tool. So you can and it's very easy to do as well, right? So you can learn how to tell stories with a little bit of effort. And all of us are in general storytellers. So with our social circle, with groups that are outside, and when we are talking one on one, we always are telling stories. So it's natural for us, and so it's easy to learn. But understand that it is one tool that allows you to convey emotion. If for whatever reason you're uncomfortable with a story, there are many other ways in which you can manage that emotional journey. But the beauty of a story is that if you go and live that story or you relate that story and it makes you feel a certain way, that is the emotion you need to keep in mind and say, hey, what happens if my audience is also feeling this way? And if you want them, if you say, no, this is a really good emotion, I want them to feel this way, then that is the perfect story for you for that particular speech. So when you go and use tools, you need to understand how those tools are managing the emotional journey. And the beauty of working with a large audience is that how it's managing your emotional journey is also the same way it'll manage the emotional journey of your audience. Now, this is different when you have in other forms of communications. I do a lot of thinking on just business communication, and
Sure.
you know, speaking in front of large audiences is one aspect of business communication. But when you're doing one-on-one communication, for example, you have to think of it slightly differently. But
Okay.
in at this stage, because we are talking about uh, large group communication, it is an extremely powerful insight for a keynote speaker or speaker who's going to speak in front of large audiences, that their emotional journey is the same as their audience's emotional journey if you're connected, right? So if there's a connection formed, then that's the same journey. So if you like the emotional journey that you're on, then understand that your audience in general will like the emotional journey that they are on. And this is a very powerful insight.
It is, I absolutely agree. And I have an immediate follow up question for you. What are the tools would you recommend for someone who is still learning the art of storytelling and can still, leverage to communicate with the power of emotions?
Yeah, so for storytelling, I would I would encourage actually to use various different tools to understand how stories can change your emotional state. So, for example, anytime you watch a movie and you watch a particular scene that gets you emotional, I would encourage your audience to just stop for a second and say, okay, what just happened here? Because what essentially the director has been able to do is to manage your emotional journey through storytelling using a different media, but they've done exactly the same thing. So what they've used the tools that they have at their disposal in terms of making a movie to manage your emotional journey, and you do that as a speaker using the tools that you have. but they're but at a fundamental level, both artists are doing exactly the same. The speaker and the movie director are doing exactly the same things. They're working with your emotions. So anytime an artist has been able to successfully do that for you, you need to just stop and think, what happened here? What are the tools? How did they develop this whole scenario or this scene so that it got me so emotionally engaged? And that'll give you a lot of ideas on how to construct stories. What is the pace in which you construct a story? What elements do you bring in when? What are the things that kind of get you emotionally charged versus not? Not just movies. You can listen to a piece of music, for example. I typically, when I do workshops on speaking, I actually play a piece of music. It's about 3-4 minutes long, and I
Okay.
all I tell them before I play the piece of music is that, think about how you're feeling now, and record how you feel at the end of playing the music. And then I ask them to think about the images that come to their mind, right? So when you hear a piece of music, you've got your eyes closed, there'll be an image that comes to your mind. And what is amazing is that, if the music conductor has done a good job, almost everybody feels exactly the same at the end of it. That
Right.
tells me they are a fantastic artist, just like a public speaker is a fantastic artist in themselves if they're able to make the whole audience feel a certain way at the end of their speech. But what the music director also, the music or piece of music also tells you is that everybody has a different story in their mind, a vision that is different than the person sitting next to you. So some people are thinking of that is based on your experience, what you have experienced in your life, and what experiences are ignited by the piece of music that you're listening to, and those experiences are different. And that is a huge learning for the people who usually attend my workshops, because they understand, we all feel the same way, but
Correct.
actually I can bring my experiences to the table And because they are connected to how I feel, when I relate those experiences, I will feel this way, and my audience will also feel the same. Right? So you can bring your own experiences, you can have different stories, but the final emotion can actually all be very, very similar, right? So you can get there from many different paths by telling different stories based on your personal experiences. But the important thing to understand is the emotion is strong because you feel it. The
Yeah.
story is part of something that meant something to you, and that emotion is what gets conveyed to the audience, and they kind of feel the same way, even though it's your personal story.
Hmm. So, what I hear is an extraordinary speaker will have the ability to help his audience echo his emotions, and
That's right.
that's
There's
that.
actually a lot of research done on this. There's a concept called mirror neurons, and it was extensively studied, with monkeys, and you see this in humans as well. It, the beauty of this is that when you're feeling a certain way, and it was done basically using facial emotions. So they mirrored, they had monkeys, and they made kind of making some faces and showing some emotion, and then they checked the emotional level of monkeys that were looking at them, and all of them basically started feeling the same way. So then they did some research, and they found out that all of us have neurons called mirror neurons, which mirror the emotion of the person that we are looking at. So
Hmm.
what I'm telling you is grounded in science. It's not that the audience can choose not to feel the way that you're feeling. They don't have a choice. Science will force them to feel exactly how you're feeling because of this idea and this concept of mirror neurons. and
Hmm.
and and so that's the power that all of us have as speakers, is that the clear understanding that if we feel a certain way and we've just engaged with the audience, right? So they are actually kind of looking at us, right? Present in the moment and actually engaged, they will feel exactly the same way. They don't have a choice in it, right? It's
Right.
just it's built into who we are as humans. And these are really powerful ideas, coming from science, that allows us to be much more effective speakers. It's the understanding of this scientific facts allow us to be confident in what we are doing as a speaker, and understanding without even knowing that our audience is kind of coming along with us, because they don't have a choice. They're forced to do that.
Amazing. Wow.
I actually want to follow up on that when you said they mirror your emotions. So when that brings me a question, when you're on the stage, you have to be authentic, because if you're not feeling it, you cannot emote it to the audience. But when you're telling a personal story, to what level of authenticity you bring that you are able to relive it, because you don't want to speak it from your voice. So, to what level of authenticity a speaker or a presenter needs to bring it to the table so that the audience connects to that level?
Hmm. So you bring up some really important things. So first is, you correctly mentioned that the one of the most important things that you can do is to be in the moment, because you can only feel emotions if you are in the moment. If you're thinking about what I need to say next, or what my next gesture is, or if I'm going to forget something, then you're not in the moment and you're not able to feel those emotions. So understand that you practice a lot, but the only reason you practice is so that you can be in the moment when you are actually delivering the speech. So you need to get so comfortable with your speech that you're not thinking about it at all. It is just part of who you are, and that allows you to be in the moment. When you're in the moment, that's when the real magic happens, because that's when you start to really live the emotions that you're feeling as part of the stories and the speech that you're delivering. When you start living those emotions, you start feeling them, then due to these scientific ideas that we've discussed, your audience starts feeling them as well. Right? And so that is the basis of a fantastic speech. right? The basis of a fantastic speech is that you feel the emotions, you're in the moment, that allows you to connect with your audience, and they are forced to essentially go on this emotional journey with you. Right? And if you're able to take them to a place, emotional place, where you which is designed and pre-planned by you, then they are left with such strong and powerful emotions that are aligned with the outcome that you desire, that it leads to really memorable and outcome focused, action oriented, communication. So that being able to be in the moment allows you to actually really deliver a good speech. It is the fundamental aspect of delivering good communication is being the ability to be in the moment.
I have a follow-up question on that because I have seen a lot of people also deliver somebody else's story. Um, but if it is somebody else's story to derive a point, um, but if it is somebody else's story, how can you be in that moment?
No, you certainly can be, because it's about how you feel about that story. So if it's not important that it's your story, but it has to connect emotionally with you. So it might be somebody else's story that triggers maybe something that you live through as a child, or that it makes a really important, or emphasizing a really important point about something that you deeply care about. These are all reasons why somebody else's story, or even a made up story, can still take you on a very strong emotional journey personally. And the important thing again to understand is, if you are able to go on that emotional journey personally, then you will be able to use that story to connect with your audience and take them on that emotional journey also, irrespective of whether it's a personal story or not. So the real test for whether a story is good or bad is around the emotional connections, or the emotional impact it has on you. And if it has an emotional impact and you are able to feel the emotions and you're able to stay in the moment, you are then being able to make the same impact on your audience, because of this scientific phenomenon that we talked about. So I use a lot of stories that are not my own. In fact, maybe I'll even give you an example later on, about a very simple story that I use that is completely made up, and everybody knows it's made up because of what the story is about. But it still always has a very strong emotional impact, because it has a very strong emotional impact on me, because of the key message that it's driving. And because it has a strong impact on me emotionally, I know that it's having a very strong impact on my audience as well.
Okay.
Tanvi, I actually have a question for you because I know you have been speaking for 11 years. On that note, emotions, when you have been speaking, and I know you've talked about where the audience didn't react, how important was for you to handle your emotion so you can connect back to the audience? And because I'd like your thoughts on that, because the reason I'm asking Tanvi is because I know she's experienced that, and then I'd like your thoughts on that.
So, because just to include you in this, context, is it was my very first keynote I was delivering in front of a corporate audience of over 50 odd very senior gentlemen of a PSU company based in India. And I was obviously not prepared in terms of what to expect. I knew my subject matter. I thought I'm just going to go and share my knowledge and expertise, and we'll take it from there. Of course, I'd rehearsed and everything, but it never ends up playing out the way you imagine it in your head to be. So, in that 1 hour of keynote which I had to deliver, my engagement with the audience, in terms of my attempts to engage with them, stayed consistent, but their engagement quotient kept on decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. While at a moment I started feeling that I was actually addressing a room full of corporate zombies, where they were just not engaging with me at my polite attempts to invite participation. It was mortifying, naturally. It was my very first gig, so I really didn't even know how to handle something like this. Uh, I was anxious, I was scared, I was worried what to do, and I tried my very best not to let these emotions come across. I think I was mildly successful in helping that happen, but it really taught me a very important lesson that, do not let your self confidence lessen how others value you, because it was not me who was the problem over here, because you, of course, as an Indian, you understand the Indian context as well, but the audience is always going to be extremely comfortable being invisible, and they're not going to be like their American counterparts, standing, jumping, shouting, engaging, participating. I didn't know this 10 years ago. I know it today. So I think that's a context Aisha is bringing up. If somebody experiences things like this in their journey and career as speakers, or even non-professional speakers, coming from the corporate world, who speak just to deliver presentations inside boardrooms and pitch sales meetings, what are your what is your advice actually for them, on how do you manage something like this? Because, the 26-year-old me also would love to learn from you on how I should have managed it better.
Yeah, these are really interesting points that you bring up. So first, let me ask you a question. When you get stuck in front of, say, an audience, or you're afraid, or you're nervous, and all of us are, why do you think you're nervous? Why? What are you afraid of?
Yeah, so 10 years ago, I was extremely afraid of them not liking me, them
Hmm.
not appreciating what I have to say, them not resonating with my thoughts and ideas. And yeah, I just wanted them to love me, actually.
And then
Plain
that's
and simple.
no, that's the same for almost every speaker, Tanvi. And I
Yeah.
just want to flip that around, and I want to point out that it's the same with me, by the way. Is whenever you are having those kinds of doubts and feelings, you're in a very selfish mode. You're thinking about yourself, right? You're thinking, I'll fail, I'll look bad, people won't like me. It's all about you.
Yeah.
And the way you get out of that is to understand that actually communication is not about you, it's about your audience, whether it's a large audience or a one-on-one, or a room with just 5 or 10 people. It's all about them, right? You are out
True.
there trying to actually convey some information, or make them feel a certain way, them, and you end up actually just caring about yourself, right? And it's not Aisha, you or Tanvi, it's everybody, including me. So when you begin to understand the basis of fear, right, of public speaking or communication in general, you realize that actually you're coming from the wrong place. And once you flip that around and you say, no, it's actually not about me, I might actually look terrible, but if my audience feels a certain way and gets the information that I need, then it's actually been a fantastic communication. My speech has
True.
been really, really good. So it's once you take the kind of the spotlight from yourself and put it on your audience, it really opens the door for many of these questions to be answered. So now look at what's happening if people are not engaging, right? So you should not be worried about whether they don't like me, or I'm falling flat, or whatever it is. Is your concern should be, they are not I'm not able to make them feel a certain way, or my information is not really helping them. What can I do to change that around? And then it becomes, you're very much in a solutions solving place, right? You're getting this information because you're in the moment. You're immediately able to figure out whether they are there or not there, that you can feel it, right? And if they're not engaged, then you as a speaker need to have a few things that you pre-plan, that you introduce to be able to get them back engaged. So typically what happens is, you're on a you've started, you've engaged with your audience, and it's like a train journey, right? You have a destination in mind, you're trying to go there on this train, right? But the train has many stops along the way. and your audience can get off the train at any of these stops. So what you need to always check is, are they still on the train or not? Yeah, are they coming on this journey with me or not? And if for whatever reason you feel that they're disengaged, then you need to have a few pre-prepared things that you introduce to get them back on the train. And,
Right.
and these could be really small, very interesting stories. There could be humorous anecdotes that you introduce, but you've tested and tried them, and you know that they work because you've tested and tried them in various different forums in front of many, many different audiences. And it doesn't really matter whether it's truly applicable to the speech that you're giving, right? What it is a way for them to get back on the train, and then you can carry on, right? So a good speaker essentially is gauging at every moment whether people are off the train or on the train. If they're on the train, they carry on with their speech because it's working, and you know that if you're on that emotional journey, everybody's coming along with you, right? The moment they feel that people are off the train, then you need to get them back on in. And you do that by having thought through that much before you actually deliver any speech. These are standard things that a speaker
Right.
would have in their toolkit. You bring them out, you get them engaged, they're back on the train, then you continue on that emotional journey, right? So think of it in that space, right? So your job is that if they're not engaged, they're losing out, and that's what you should be worried about. They're losing out because they will not receive, because they're not on the train, right? So you're moving along emotionally and on the information side, and they're missing out on that. That is what should be your big concern, is that, hey, I have a few people who I am not able to engage emotionally and on the information side because they are off the train. So I need to bring them back in. Right? And this kind of thinking that allows you to then handle these situations very differently. I'm not saying that they won't be difficult, actually. So,
Yeah.
sometimes you have hostile crowds, there are people who are just completely in a different setting because of what's happening maybe in their local environment. It's still a difficult thing, but it allows you to problem solve from a very different perspective. And I think that perspective allows it to be a lot more effective.
Brilliant. Amazing. So, yes, I think eventually in my journey also, I totally echo with what you said. I realized that, it's never about you. As a speaker, it's always about the audience and how you can serve them. And I'm sure every speaker realizes this the hard way eventually. When they've done it over and over and over again, and it finally sinks in there, oh my God, I'm just looking at it through a very wrong, self centered lens. And once that shifts, they start really figuring out all these other aspects of how do I not only get them on board the train, have you beautifully used a metaphor, but keep them on board with me. So, Aisha, I hope both of us have answered your question.
Yes, I actually, you know how you say it's about the audience. I learned it the hard way by losing at district last year because my focus was I just won that trophy. And when I didn't place, obviously, I heard my mentor say that they gave you a gift of 5 to 7 minutes, and you did not respect that gift. And so that shifted. And I think that's what helped me place second this year because I remember having a conversation right before my speech, and somebody said nervous, and I said no, I'm not. And I said that maybe it's not a good thing. I don't know, but I was just so excited just to share that message and to take them through my journey that I did not feel nervous, and I actually enjoyed the whole process instead of being
Mhm.
stressed and worrying where am I going to place, how somebody is judging me. So and I'm glad that I had that shift very early on, and I'm hoping to build on that emotions. But I have one more questions, and maybe both of you can answer for that because Tanvi is also a world certified coach. Like, we both graduated together, so I'd like your opinion as well. When we talk about emotions, there are various emotions that get invoked from our stories or actions. They can be anger, sadness, happiness. But if you're talking about a heavy topic, but the message for the message to be given to the audience, that journey of heavy topic is important, how important or how crucial it is to lift up your audience and not leave them with the heavy emotions there.
Yeah, we could have another hour on this, by the way. See, the study of emotions is in itself a field, fully, full scientific field. So it's actually a very important aspect, and that's why good speaking is not an easy thing to do. It's because you're working with emotions, and working with emotions is never very easy. What you'll find is that heavier emotions, anger, sadness, hate, these kinds of emotions are extremely strong, and you have to be very careful how you use them. So I'll give you an example of, say, a roller coaster ride. So, roller coaster rides are really typically very, very short. They're about 2 minutes or so. And there's a reason for that. I mean, there's a reason why you don't have a 45-minute roller coaster ride. Right? So,
Right.
after a point, the emotions become overwhelming and you completely disconnect. Right. So, I'm sure you felt that also, is that when the emotions, typically the heavy emotions, are so strong that your mind cannot handle them, right? And you disconnect. You just say, I don't even want to think about this. I want to just I'm just going to go away. And, yeah. So what you want to do is, when you are working with heavy emotions, be very cognizant of the emotional journey of your audience. And that is why you will see many speakers actually bring in lighter emotions even on a heavy topic, is because they are managing the impacts of using heavy emotions, because that's what the topic requires, but not overwhelming their audience in the emotional sense. Right? So the art of writing a good speech and planning that emotional journey is that balance of how and when you bring in the various different emotions. Because I can guarantee that if you have a 10-minute speech and you talk 5 minutes about positive emotions and 5 minutes about negative emotions, your audience will only remember the negative emotions, because 5 minutes of negative emotions is a lot stronger, based on and there are again scientific reasons for that, versus 5 minutes of positive emotions. Most negative emotions come from how we've kind of developed as humans. They are related to our survival, kind of our survival, right? So if you see a lion, then you run, right? And that emotion is extremely strong because it's based on survival, right? And then might be a very good lion, maybe a pet lion, but you don't, those are not the things that you think about. You have a very strong emotion, and you survive, right? So strong emotions, the heavy emotions, are typically based on survival skills, and that's why they're extremely strong, very potent, but to be used very carefully, because if you use them too much, then they overwhelm you, and then you completely lose your audience because they're emotional fatigue. So working with emotions is easy to say, very difficult to master. And not just for public speakers, in all kinds of aspects of life, including corporate America, the people and the leaders who get to the highest levels are the people who are able to work very well with emotions. So, emotional quotient, or EQ as theirs, is one of the best indicators of success in anything that you do. And that requires you to work very effectively with emotions. Right? So it's the beauty of what of Toastmasters that nobody tells you, is that it allows you to build EQ through practicing how to speak in public. And the advantages are not just in your speaking life, it is in every aspect of your life, because your overall success as a human, in many aspects, in most aspects, is determined by your ability to manage and work with emotions.
Wow. Well, we can actually wrap up the episode on this note, but I'm going to be a little greedy and ask you a closing question. You said that every emotion has its own place in the roller coaster of the story. But in your journey of speaking, as well as, of course, writing your book, have you researched and proven any specific human emotions which see the highest resonance? The universal emotions, as they say, they're the universal messages that usually resonate the most with the winning speeches, as we've seen of Toastmasters. Are there any such universal emotions you've seen time and again being employed in a fantastic speech, which is going to be a no-brainer when it's supposed to move the audience?
Yeah, so I again approach it slightly differently. Typically, the stronger emotions have the most impact, and so we need to always remember that. That's why you'll see a lot of heavy topics being brought into Toastmasters championship speaking. There was always a joke that if nobody dies in your speech, you cannot win the world championship. So these are all things, but essentially what they're telling you is that the heavy emotions have a strong impact, which is in general true. That doesn't mean that a positive emotional speech cannot win, but you have 7 minutes to make a strong impact, and typically that means you'll have to use one of the heavier emotions to kind of drive that impact. But to be able to do that, you have to, for the first 5 or 6 minutes, you have to work with the lighter emotions as well, because truly, to make you feel a certain way using a heavier emotion, I don't need more than a minute to 30 seconds. So but what do I do with the remaining 6 minutes? And that's where I put you in a place where when I bring those emotions, you are truly present to be able to absorb them and feel them. Right? And that requires making you really comfortable, and that might require a lot of lighter emotions upfront in the speech. That gets you really comfortable, gets you really engaged, so you're in the moment, gets you a little bit in not expecting the end, so that you're open to the emotions that you're able to feel. Because understand, we talked a little bit about this. Naturally, socially, we are told not to show strong emotions, right? So there'll be barriers that come in as soon as people expect that, oh, this is a strong emotional part that I'm going into. That is one of the places where they can get off the train, if they know already that strong emotions are coming in, because socially we are uncomfortable with that. So getting people to a place where they're not expecting that strong emotions to come in, so that they come along the journey, and actually feel the full impact of those emotions. That's what the initial part of the speech is about. How do you set it up so that when I hit you, as a boxer would say, then I hit you flush and you're not expecting it, and there are no hands on in front of your face to block the shot. All of those things you're setting up, and then you hit your audience, right, with the strong
Yeah.
emotion. And that's what really leaves an impact, and makes a speech really memorable.
Wow, amazing. I'll call it the formula for the speech that will guarantee to kill at least one member in the audience.
If that member is you, the interesting part is you can be assured that everybody else is also being killed, right?
Absolutely.
And
Law of resonance.
yeah, and
Great. Thank you
that's
so
what it is.
much.
Hey,
Uh,
no problem. Really, really do appreciate this opportunity.
I'll just take this a little moment to bring the question from our last guest for you, Vikas.
Yep.
I'll bring the question to the stage.
Winning the World Championship of Public Speaking, how has your life changed? And what has surprised you?
My life after the winning the World Championship of Public Speaking has changed, I think, tremendously, for the better. I'm not a professional speaker, but I use communication on a daily basis in the work that I do. As a business leader, I engage in various different types of communication, helping people deliver better results because they are better communicators, and helping the business deliver better outcomes because of the engagement and the communication that happens within teams and within organizations. The learning that happened during those initial phases of leading up to the World Championship forms the basis of how I approach communication. So it has formed the way that I approach communication, all aspects of communication. So in that sense, it profoundly changed me. And I believe it profoundly continues to change everybody I interact with on a daily basis. Uh, what what really stood out for me, or what was unexpected, was how fundamental and simple the basics of communication are, and how we have made it so complicated. Right? So if working with emotions is really a very fundamental thing of what all humans do, we have layered it with various different complexities and made it quite a difficult task. So one of the things that I endeavor to do as a communicator is to help people peel those layers off, so that they go back to the natural state that in itself allows them to be fantastic communicators. You don't have to learn how to be a fantastic communicator. In many ways, you have to unlearn a lot of things so that you can get back to being a fantastic communicator, because eventually it is all about emotions, and we humans are built to work very well with emotions. So that was one of the things that was really interesting and a good insight for me.
Amazing. Thank you.
I mean, this is a topic we can go on, and this will never end. But I think that's a beautiful note to wrap. Tanvi and Vikas, your final thoughts before we wrap?
Look, thank you so much, Vikas, for joining us today on Slay That Stage. It's been a super rapid hour. Unfortunately, I have so many more questions which I hope to continue picking your brains on eventually, maybe some other time, either on podcast or offline as well. But it's been an absolute pleasure hearing you today and learning from your years of experience, expertise, and amazing wisdom that you've passed on to us today. And eventually, all the members are going to see, whether it's from Toastmasters or beyond, this amazing episode where you've so graciously passed it on to all of us. So, thank you so much for doing that.
Hey, thank you both, Tanvi and Ayesha. It's really creditable as to what you guys are doing, because these kinds of opportunities allow for many more people to become aware of different ideas and different perspectives on speaking. And eventually, you can hope that one of these ideas connects with that particular individual. And if that can happen, then we've changed a life. So I believe that hopefully we'll change a few lives, the three of us today, through this conversation. And as you continue to engage more speakers, you can rest assured that you're changing many, many more lives. So it's a fantastic effort. I really, really appreciate the time that you all are putting in. And again, I'm so thankful that I was even considered to be part of this podcast. I'm really thankful to be here.
Thank you, Vikas. I mean, as Tanvi said, exactly my emotions, that we are really, really grateful that you accepted our invitation to join here, because we really learned something different. And so the only way that thing that I will tell the audience is feel the emotions, communicate, and change lives. I think that's a beautiful note to end on. But here's a little homework for our audience. Why don't you comment and let us know what emotions did this episode invoke and who you would like to see next? Until then, it's a wrap.